Hearing. From a concert to the beach or a simple I love you. Hearing is something most of us take for granted. But what would you do if you woke up tomorrow and there is nothing but silence? In today's video, we will be exploring the deaf community inside of VRChat. I meet with Taito, who is hard of hearing, and asked me to make this video. Jenny, who's also hard of hearing, and she'll be the one interpreting for me. And I also met with Crow and Ray, who are both fully deaf. So let's go ahead and get a bit of an introduction from them.
I was born deaf. I grew up deaf. I went to school deaf. Pretty much a small amount of my childhood was spent deaf, but thanks to surgeries and therapy, I learned how to hear a small amount, like a tiny bit, and then after the years it got better and better.
I was born very, very ill. My ears had very bad infections, and I had a very high temperature, a high fever, and basically both my ears became deaf through that. Yeah, I'm a fully deaf person. Sound is vibrations, and it moves in the air. And when it hits your eardrum, it's supposed to make it vibrate. But my right eardrum, when it hits it, it just stands still. It doesn't move. It was so long ago that I don't remember the details perfectly. But from what I remember, I was born with like small eardrums, if I remember correctly. I also had a lot of infections in my ear when I was really young. Around, I want to say like 12, I had really bad infection in my right ear. And I went on a plane, and it was like, it just made it worse, just like this really awful pain in my ear, like deep in my eardrum from the pressure of on a plane and the infection. And it ended up damaging my ear. I was born deaf. That's just how it happened. I don't exactly know why. Maybe it was some sort of infection or, something from my parents' illness that was passed down from me. Both my parents are fully hearing. And also my entire family. Every single person is hearing except for me.
People out in public might not know right away that you have hearing loss, and that might lead to some pretty awkward encounters. So, what is a memory you have in public because of your hearing loss?
Someone wanting to help me cross the street. Because I went up to them. I couldn't understand them. And I said, sorry. Again, please. I'm hard of hearing. And I had a little tag as well. I was that special. Because at that point it was quite bad. So I went up to them. I was like, here. I'm like, oh, you're deaf. I see. And I didn't. Then they said, do you want help crossing this road? do you need help? Here, take my arm. Take my arm. Let's go. I wanted to go with him because it would have been funny to me, but I didn't want that person going away from me with that expectation of deaf and hard of hearing people that they need that help.
I think one moment in particular, so I was at McDonald's, and the worker there was speaking to me, and I was telling them, I can't hear. I wrote down paper, and they were like, what? I don't want to use paper, whatever. They weren't respecting me. Another person came up to me and explained that I need writing, so I wrote to them, and they were like, oh, hey, you're not being respectful to this person. But they thought that I was a fake deaf person. And I'm like, why would you think that? Like, no, you're wrong. So, they weren't respecting me because they didn't understand that I'm a true deaf person, and that I use sign language to communicate, and writing in this case. That was very hurtful for me. It's not true what they said. So I think sorry, it makes me giggle. One time I went to a deaf meetup. It was at a pumpkin patch, and there they sold a bunch of like pumpkin foods or pumpkin drinks, and so I really wanted to go there. And like a habit that I have is when I'm signing a lot, like my brain kind of switches into like sign mode, and it's hard for me to stop. So like I'll usually be talking and signing at the same time, and I won't realize it. And so I went to buy some sort of like pumpkin food. I can't remember. And I was at the counter, and the lady, like, she checked me out, and then she said, oh, that'd be like $2 or whatever it was. And I was looking down and grabbing money, and I signed to her. I'm like, oh, okay, 1 second. And she saw that I signed and immediately assumed that I was profoundly deaf, because just sign language equals deaf person, I guess, in her mind. And I looked up to give her the money, and she like froze, because in her mind she was like, oh, deaf person, like, how do I communicate, right? And so she was like sitting there, and she's like, she like took the money, and then she looked at me, and she's like, your hair cute. I will never forget it. I was like sitting there, I'm like, what? Like first of all, she started whispering. She didn't like normally people start yelling. She was whispering, and she was like, I'm like, first of all, now you made it harder for me to understand. And like she was like, you're I was like, thank you. But like, it was such like a weird, like,
or did you just like?
I couldn't help but laugh. I couldn't help but laugh. I was like, I would totally just laughed at her, and I'm like, oh, thank you. I said thank you, and I laughed. But I feel like that experience kind of opened my eyes to like hearing people's perspective of, because it is scary. I can respect that. It is scary for coming up to somebody and having zero understanding of how do I communicate with this person. I could totally understand how that might be completely overwhelming. But, a part of me in my heart could have took that and laughed at her and called her stupid. But the other side of me was like, oh, that was so sweet of her to like really try to help and communicate that she liked my hair. Oh, yeah, so many times. Sometimes when I tell people that I can't hear them, they'll be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And then they'll leave. Like, they're scared of me. And I'm like, I'm not a monster, If somebody comes up to me and they're struggling to communicate, there's a lot of ways that we can communicate. Through our phones, we could text each other, or we can get a piece of paper and write. I still can help you. I could still ask you to speak slowly and understand your lip reading. No need to run away. I feel like people should at least try to, communicate. I've experienced it so many times, people just saying, oh, I'm sorry. You don't need to say that. I'm used to it.
I assume growing up, hard of hearing or deaf may have been different than those who grew up with full hearing. So what was it like growing up?
I was trying to communicate with my family. I was writing, and because they would speak to me and I just wouldn't understand. And it was really hard for me because, you don't know what you don't learn. And when my mother finally started to understand that she needed to learn sign to communicate with me, it was a really good experience for the both of us. It was, she researched everything that she needed, where I could go for a school for the deaf, and I wanted to take classes for ASL. My mom studied. She learned everything. She learned how to fingerspell and how to sign, and finally I started to understand, and I owe a lot of, my education to my mom. She was the one who taught me how to fingerspell my name, Ramond. Me being a child, I wasn't used to it, and it was my first real experience with sign language that I remember. That first time that my mother was fingerspelling to me, I was able to understand, my first and my last name. And of course it was awkward, but again and again, she would fingerspell to me until I understood. And, it was a really eye-opening experience for me having that first time. As I grew older, I really didn't know that anything was wrong. One of my early memories is being on the bus with my friends and saying, isn't it so awful that like you have to focus really hard on speech and everything just kind of melds together if you don't, and you kind of have to look at people's lips to understand what they're saying, and it's really hard to communicate. And they're like, what? That's not normal. And I'm like, oh wait, what? That's not normal? Like I just had no idea. And so basically my experience is like, if I hear a lot of noises all at once, it sounds like a broken radio in my ear, and it's like popping and moving and a lot of pain. So, you know, it's just like I said, deafness is a huge spectrum, and so is hearing loss or hard of hearingness. And, you know, I have hearing aid in my right ear, but I usually use it to help if there's pain. So if there's a lot of noise, then I'll turn my hearing aid to essentially like deafen my right ear and just like stop all the noise. And that helps out the problems. Other than that, I can lip read really well. So that's helped me a lot. In the second grade, around that time, that's when I became used to signing, became used to, you know, deaf interaction, and having hearing teachers before that would sign. It was better for me. You know, with all hearing teachers that use their voice, it was, you know, I kind of needed extra help. I needed an interpreter there to help me. And for me, you know, that's why it's better that I was educated in a deaf school, not through writing or reading or interpreters giving me my information about science or math or whatever it is. So yeah, that's why I went to a deaf school, and it was much better for my education. It supported me a lot. My English skills, my writing, my reading. My education really improved going to a deaf school.
VR Sign Language is a really great thing for the deaf community. However, there is one major issue. The signs used are very limited to the controllers. But for those wanting to learn, they do have classes to help teach you VR Sign Language. And I was fortunate enough to get to go to one of these classes.
All right, next one. You. It's not rude to point in sign language. You over there. You over there. You. Not rude. I know in, you know, hearing culture, it's considered rude. You don't point at me. No. In sign language, that's all pronouns. So she, he, them, him, her, you.
So how hard is it to actually transition into VR Sign Language?
So it was a really awkward experience because So without index, it's like you're limited to like open hand, peace sign, pointer, thumb, finger gun, thumbs up, fist, and relaxed, I think. And so it's like before that I had that. Oh yeah, and rock and roll. But I didn't have index, and so I was just like, I can remember I was like, how do you sign with these limitations? Like I was like, okay, I can say nice with open hand, I could say meet with pointer, I could say you, and like I was just so awkward, and like I was going like super slow because I just totally didn't understand. But I'd say with anything, it's a learning curve. You know, it's hard when you start off. You gotta keep practicing more and more, and then you get to the top of it, and it's you just got it, and it's super easy and more comfortable. And you know, now, like I said, 2 years of being in here, like I sign just as fast in real life. In VR, I sign just as comfortably in VR, and you know, but I won't lie, it was definitely very awkward and and weird to begin with, because you have this huge plastic thing in your hand and you're like, what do I do with this? But I also say it's you know, muscle memory, just practicing more and more and more and remembering more and more until you can do it with your eyes closed. Eventually, when I got VR, I started working really hard practicing how to use my hands, you know, through the different hand gestures that we had. You know, of course, it was a little bit hard for me, but as I practiced more and more, I became used to it. And now I learned very quickly how to use my controllers. And, you know, later on now I switched to index. And so I can have more full finger tracking, and it's much better for sign language. And I really thank the people who made this technology because, now it's here in the world and we're able to use it. I'm really ready for anyone who wants to learn ASL here in this class. I welcome them to come, please come here and enjoy our community, have a bunch of fun and learn sign and, meet our staff, everyone here, meet our deaf teachers and all of our students and everyone in between who's willing to be here and support you. Yeah, that's all.
If a big classroom makes you a little anxious though, there is a world made by Mr. Dummy where you can actually self-teach yourself ASL in VR. And Jenny's gonna go ahead and give us a tour.
So this is Mr. Dummy. He's the creator of the world. That very angry looking anime girl right here pointing at the rules. He's hard of hearing. All right, so here is like the main spectacle of the entire world. This is where you're going to be doing most of your learning. And then you can come over here and click how are you if you want to learn how to say how are you. And then it's going to show up right here in this video screen. And this is one of our deaf teachers. His name is Catman2010. And you can see him right there signing how are you. And this is just a great way to learn on your own pace. If you feel like you want to go to an actual class, over here's your schedule, and we have a class every single day. Here's the museum. Ready? Woo! I'm not going to go through everything because that will take me a very long time. But I encourage people to come here and read about it because it is so cool learning about the history of sign language.
I hope you learned a lot from this video, and if you are looking for a deaf community, Helping Hands is the largest deaf community inside of VR. If you'd like more info, then feel free to join their Discord community. You can find the link down in the description below. And down below you can find the YouTube channels of Jenny, Ray, Crow, and Taito, so feel free to check them out and give them some support. That's all I have for you guys today, and here's Helping Hands wishing you all a farewell.
On the count of 3, everyone say, helping hands!
Helping hands!
Helping hands!
Helping hands!
Helping hands. There was no count to 3, Jenny.
There was no count to 3.
You failed me.
If you want to help support the channel, then please consider subscribing. It only takes 1 second and it really does help a lot. And if you enjoyed this video, then maybe leave a like and a comment. If you'd like to be a part of my community, you should join the Discord and follow me on Twitter. Links are down in the description below.